This is Silverspook, the Silverspook stream slash video, and very happy to be here talking to a friend and former panelist from a couple years ago, uh, Carl Jha, who is a host of the Silk and Steel podcast and very knowledgeable expert on many topics, especially Chinese history and also Fallout, which we're going to get to that, I'm sure. But yeah, thank you so much.
I'm not an expert on Fallout.
I just kidding.
Play the game.
I just kidding. But we will be talking about some topics related to, I think because we're both Asia and in the Asia Pacific region. Obviously I'm Native Hawaiian, and Carl is also of course Chinese and is in Indonesia, right, at the moment.
In Bali, yeah.
Yeah, so we're both so we've talked about some of the issues and history in our region, and I just wanted to kind of talk about that some more, especially in light of where things are right now, very tense in the Pacific. But anyways, I feel like I just want to throw it up into you, Carl, because I know we both very active on the social media, and there's a lot of, it's hard to think straight because there's so many things happening all at once. I don't know, how are you doing, and maybe you can just briefly introduce yourself and talk about how things are going.
Hi guys, I am Carl Jha. So I was born in China 1 month after Mao died, and I grew up in 1980s China, when China was a vastly different place. I came to United States in 1990, so I went to 8th grade, high school, college in US. I spent about almost 30 years in US, and now I am in Bali, Indonesia. But talking about China history, culture, politics, that has always been my passion. I mean, this is what I can geek on forever, and I love Fallout. I played the original Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 games, and have been a fan since. So the Amazon TV series just came out. I guess that's why you brought me here, right? Is to talk about Fallout and a little bit about China too, of course.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I was of course joking. I am not a Fallout expert. Neither of us are. We don't work for Bethesda or Interplay or Amazon Prime. But that is a topic I figured that would come up because I am a Fallout fan. Also, I played 1 and 2, the original, and also the later. And it does relate to these topics, I think, in many ways. Unfortunately, because of how close things seem to be to that universe. And I find it playing through it again, I find a lot of parallels. But anyways, yeah. So you come from a background where I think you said you were born in China, then you lived in the United States for some time, and then now you're in of course Southeast Asia. That's ASEAN, yeah, in Indonesia. So yeah. So yeah. So I don't know. How do you feel like and that's like a pretty unique experience, right? Because you kind of like saw America, and I think you said that you mentioned that like being in the U.S. right around the time when the United States was starting to move towards the Iraq War, that kind of was a radicalizing, or kind of like made you think, reconsider like your image of the the U.S., etc. Maybe you could talk about like how that impacted you.
So the first week I came to the U.S., I went to a U.S. school, and this was during the first Gulf War. This is 1990, and through our elementary school, there's like posters of all like support our troops, like or rah rah America. But I just thought it was odd because this is U.S. sending troops halfway across the globe to Iraq. I didn't understand how that have to do with patriotism or defending America because you're sending troops to Iraq. But and although it was kind of it's kind of my first experience with the kind of the American militarism that's promoted at like an elementary school level. I thought it was a bit over the top. And then but I was only 13 years old. and I you know I had the typical immigrant experience, trying to fit in, try to assimilate, learning the English language, uh, and I so I graduated college, and start work right around the time of Iraq, when Iraq wars kicked off, so 2003. um, and this I saw I watched on the news the whole lead up to the UN weapon inspection. And at the time, it seems obvious to me the whole excuse to go to Iraq is so bogus. I mean, I can't. Then you saw Hillary Clinton at that time was running for office, and of course she's running for office in New York, and she was one of these politicians that was pushing to authorize U.S. military action in Iraq. I thought this is whole. How can nobody see this? This is. I mean, I was aware there was anti-war protest. I was in Chicago at the time. There was actually a big anti-war protest in Chicago. But what surprised me was how in the end that didn't mean anything. You have mainstream media like New York Times pushing warmongering stories about anthrax attacks in US, and about how Saddam Hussein is going to launch chemical or nuclear weapons. They talk about Iraq weapons of mass destruction. How is that existential threat to the US, and how they even did like on TV they did like a scenario, what happened if there's the chemical weapon attack, happen in downtown metro area. It's crazy. It's like they're just trying to scare people. But yet a lot of people did go along with it, bought into the narrative. And then I witnessed how the whole Iraq war unfolded. So before the whole period from when I landed in US in 1990 up to the Iraq War 2003. At that time, this whole 13 years, I kind of bought into the whole American dream, right? And because I look at myself, I'm an immigrant. I study hard. I got into good schools, so I'm like, okay, yeah, America works. America is a meritocracy. And then I saw the Iraq War. That was a very radicalizing experience for me, because it's just so this is so like the whole weapon of mass destruction charge. It was just such trumped up made up excuse. You have the UN weapon inspectors went on UN saying, please give us more time, please give us more time, we don't need to take military action. But US went ahead anyway. It's so obvious at that time they were just riding on the wave of post 9/11. Kind of America kind of went crazy for a while after 9/11. They're just using the opportunity to push the US geopolitical objectives in the Middle East to control the flow of oil. And yet how I saw how little public opinion matters in US at the time. Despite all the anti-war protests, all the rallies, everything, it didn't matter to the US politicians. They push for war anyway. So that's when that kind of led me down to the path of doubting the whole American democracy and how this is all about freedom. I mean, like the rhetoric at that time was insane. George Washington, I mean, George W. Bush was saying, "Oh, because they hate us for our freedom." Oh, nobody hate you Americans for their freedom. People hate the U.S. government for their interventionist foreign policy. That's the very most simplest explanation. Yet they're doing all these mental gymnastics to justify to the Americans, no, like these people just have to be put down because they are existential threat to the way of life in America, which is completely bogus. And that actually just opened up my eyes, and I realized, Iraq war didn't happen in a vacuum. This has been the way U.S. has operated forever. This is how the empire works. It just around the time 2008. That's when I got on Twitter. At that time I used Twitter as a as a news aggregate channel, because I don't trust the mainstream media anymore after the fiasco in Iraq War. I was trying to understand stuff like the Syrian war. So I try to follow everybody. I try to follow, all the ISIS jihadist sympathizers. I follow the Syrian government supporters. I follow all these open source intelligence bro who are obviously backed by three-letter agencies, and so I try to get a whole like a whole picture from all sides, and that's the moment I kind of it's really realize how fucked up the empire was. You have CIA supporting one faction in Syria, fighting with others, another faction that's supporting the Pentagon. I mean, this is madness, and a lot of Americans don't even realize this. They've just been told on TV, Assad is this genocidal maniac that we have to support the Syrian people to overthrow Assad, but you look at the opposition to Assad, this bunch of Al Qaeda folks, and then you have you have those Hillary email got leaked out. You have Jake Sullivan. Now Jake Sullivan is a national security security advisor to Biden. But Jake Sullivan sent an email to Hillary Clinton back then during the Syrian war. He said, this Al Qaeda, they're on our side in Syria. That's what he said in the email. But it was even more open than that. You have General Petraeus, who wrote op-eds. I forgot it was Washington Post or New York Times. He said, "Yeah, we can work with a moderate Al Qaeda,
moderate rebels
in the Middle East. Yeah, the moderate rebels. I mean, this is how ISIS got started." So yeah, so this is where I felt like, and then I saw the kind of the U.S. Start cranking up its anti-China propaganda, and for someone who is bicultural, grew up with both background, I felt I need to speak up because ever since I came to United States in 1990, I was hungry for news about my homeland in China, so I tried to read everything. I was a newspaper delivery boy for New York Times when I was a teenager in high school. So I got to read New York Times every day. I had a habit to read New York Times for 10 years every day. And initially, for the whole 10 years, I kind of bought into the whole mainstream narrative on Yugoslavia, on the Kosovo War, and on China. I know they're not right getting in China right, because whenever I read the news about China, they're not talking about the China I left behind. They're talking about some China existing in some bizarro world, right? But at that time, I just assumed, okay, that's just because Westerners don't get China. China's too complicated, too ancient culture for them to understand. So, but and then I got exposed to U.S. coverage of like former Soviet Union, and I think I was reading an online publication called The Exile. It was started by a bunch of American expats who were in Moscow at the time, that was actually uh, founded by Mark Ames and Matt Taibbi. Before Matt Taibbi went mainstream, and Matt Taibbi actually wrote about how all the reporting on Russia was like from a template. Like he would get on the plane to fly to Tashkent in Central Asia, but he will have the story all written up while he was on the plane. It just need to fill in the blanks of the names of the people who he's supposedly going to interview. So that's when it opened up my eyes. Okay, it's not just about China. They do the same thing about in former Soviet Union, in former Yugoslavia. It's this is a very well-oiled propaganda machine, and I'm going all over the place. Stop me anytime.
oh well
I'm just kind of talking about my political awakening.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's good that you kind of lay it all out, because I mean, for mine, it's very similar. I mean, obviously, well, I'm in Hawaii, which is, of course, it's contentious right now because the United Nations has declared the country of Hawaii. The United States, like as you point out, kind of refuses to accept what the rest of the world, other countries and peoples, believe to be the truth, and enforces their way, similar to Palestine. But as a native Hawaiian, like I grew up similar in the sense of like, well, a little bit different because my family themselves were more brainwashed already. You know, like because you lived in the U.S. like you had a little bit of time in your childhood in China, and then you came to the U.S. I believe in grade school, if I'm not mistaken, right? Or
Yeah.
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 So for me, like my parents, like Hawaiian, like just as one example, like many people on this channel, you probably already know that I talk about Hawaiian history and from a decolonized, unbrainwashed perspective. But my parents grew up when Hawaiian language was banned, the culture was banned. My parents, they believe, they're Hawaiian, but they believe themselves to be Americans, but just like not quite American enough, And so they're from the ghetto. We're from the actually. I looked it up. It's like the poorest place in the U.S. Statistically, it's like 69% poverty rate. The specific part of Oahu that I'm from. I didn't realize that till I was 30 something. And I was like, I thought everyone in America just has like super poor people and then super rich people with all of the hotels, and then the military everywhere, right? But it's like then I realized no, that's not. This is actually not normal, or it's not everywhere. It's like that. But this is Hawaii, which is, and we were told all kind of weird things like, Hawaiians. This like here's a coloring book with the princess and the queen. Maybe, and mostly you guys just live in little huts and nothing interesting happened until America showed up and gave you electricity and roads and saved you. And so, and my parents, and obviously that's all, that's a whole history train I can go on eventually. But, it's kind of like my parents were raised to believe, kind of like what you're saying, that like when you kind of bought in your like some of your childhood, you're like, oh yeah, America is a place where you can build the American dream. And my parents were like a whole generation or maybe 2 generations. They spoke no Hawaiian. They knew nothing about themselves. So like for me, it's kind of like similar to you though. Like around the Iraq War time, I flew to my college. My college was weird. It was the Evergreen State College. It was the only college where all the professors signed a no war. The day after 9/11, they signed a no. The college professor said no to any wars anywhere in the Middle East. And the next year, my college tuition doubled because the state said, we're not going to subsidize your college anymore if your professors are anti-war, because this was the beginning of the era of the Iraq War and the 7 wars, 7 countries wars that there was the
7 wars, yeah.
Right? And so I remember like thinking at that time, and I was like, wow. Well, number one, why are they hitting the towers? And I was listening to the same speeches by George W. Bush, and I was like, they hate our freedom. And then like I feel like I didn't have access to a lot of. I was still kind of like brought into that bubble. My parents, they said like, you got to go to the best school. They were kind of disappointed because I went to one of those $20,000 a year Ivy League feeder schools. They like, you got to go to Yale, Harvard, or Princeton, or you're like a failure kind. So they're like, why are you going to this weird hippie school? Are you some kind of pinko commie? My parents are like, it's so weird, right? Because like mom and dad, you guys are like Native Hawaiians. Why are you so American? And they're like some my I remember my college coordinator was like, you didn't get into Harvard, so that's a disappointment. And it was like, well, I mean, I didn't really want to go there. I wanted to go do something interesting. But when I got there, I remember thinking like why is our tuition going up? Why are we being hit? And then like you said, I kind of looked into it by some journalists. Like some of them were, some of the Matt Taibbi, I remember reading some of his articles. At Empire Files, Mike Preisner and Abby Martin. I think Mike Preisner was kind of leading some of those. He was an American Iraq War vet, right? And then he kind of led the charge. Like he was recently, his speeches from the Noughties era were kind of shown after Aaron Bushnell's event. I think he was one of the military personnel who said like, and I think he took a bunch with his fellow soldiers recently, and they burnt all their uniforms, right? So I remember like listening to some of those kind of the speeches, and they're going like, I came back, I was abroad in this war, so I was a journalist. I think Chris Hedges was one I was reading at that time. He was fired. He was kicked out of the New York Times because of his anti-war stances, right, during that era. And I remember going like, listening to the mainstream media, listening to Western media, even listening to my own Hawaiian family, in Hawaii, and they're like, kind of like just going along, watching them go along with it was just like something is really, really wrong. And then that's kind of like I became more isolated, like within that, within my own circles. But then like kind of with the younger generation, I feel like there's less total brainwash. The brainwashing is maybe less totally successful with Gen Z and Gen Alpha for, from what I can gather in the West. I mean, there's still a fight, but statistically, right, it's like 70% of the young younger generations were like for Palestine. It's mostly like the older generations, the Western ones anyway, that are like still kind of falling for the same imperial lies. Anyway, long story short, that's kind of like that's where. So I think there's many similarities there, and and of course, like we're still in a difficult position today. The U.S. I don't know. Obviously China is the number one target for the United States, geopolitical, planetary rival, and Hawaii. Just from our perspective here. From my perspective, like we're currently in all kinds of fights. Like it was not good at that time. Like I said, we have the highest poverty rate in many districts in where we are. We have the highest U.S. military per capita military employment and military personnel is in Hawaii of any state, and Hawaii has the highest rate of per acre military occupations. Like 25% of Hawaii and growing is just like all military. Like there's the Red Hill disaster where they spilled all this jet fuel. It's really been an ongoing problem. The U.S. military, we had to fight so hard, like Hawaiians and many anti-imperial and environmental aggregation of movements had to fight so hard just to get them to drain. They finally did drain the tanks, at least the 100 million gallons of jet fuel, thankfully. But there's still jet fuel. Like there's jet fuel, there's the PFAS, forever chemicals. It's all this. It's still like in that water. Just this week, in the last couple of weeks, the Oahu water protectors and they've been trying to fight to have the military in the U.S. like reveal how much of the water is actually poisoned. It's been shown that they said it was clean. It's coming out like it's like not. It's still not. It's coming out looking like milk. Like water coming out of the tap looks like milk. Anyway, so there's fights in like Hawaii is apparently very close to banning Airbnbs because of the rate of homelessness is so high because of how much of the property is just being like turned into like empty, super expensive like luxury resort housing. And after the Haina fire, and so we're still fighting over there. It's anyway. So it's really like we're in a difficult place. At the same time, and I'll kick it over to you after this one because there was a Washington Post article. I know you shared it as well. That was written about how the U.S. is preparing and making its new strategies to fight the new war on China, like as if that the United States is definitely fighting the war on China. It's like it's just gonna happen, and like half of the article is citing all these places. This is like where I live. Like one of them is in Kaneohe Marine Corps Base, where they're sending messages to that's in Oahu, and they're sending messages to practice island hopping, first island chain strategy. And they're sending messages from basically like 5 miles from where I grew up. Right next to the ghetto is the military base, right? And they're sending messages to the island I'm currently on about, where and how to fire the missile with this kind of. So they're practicing fighting this, like, I was like reading this article and I'm like, you're talking about the United States military is openly talking about shooting missiles at China, and you're practicing to do that, like where I live right now. Like on all my islands, all of our Hawaiian islands. And I was like, I like read that, and then the fall commercial came out, and it's like, hey everybody, we're gonna blow the world. And I was like, this like Fallout, that just is it, right? It's like this is like completely out of its mind. This is like completely lunatic. I mean, this is right. I can't believe what I'm reading, right? And so, and that's where I was like, it's so relevant. Also, there's a war between the U.S. and China. That's the background. Radiation in the background world for Fallout. So anyways, I don't know if you want to respond to like any of that, from your perspective.
Yeah, I think this is why actually the Fallout game franchise strikes a chord with the American audience, because we know all the premise of Fallout is American government is evil, and and it's doing all these fucked up experiment on its own population, through all various type of mind control, surveillance, and it's like and this all led to a very destructive outcome. The Great War between U.S. and China, where all the U.S. got nuked, and I think it's because it's actually realistic, and because everybody kind of recognize the different facet of the fucked up U.S. actions, that the game actually could resonate with the gamers. At least that's how I felt when I played the original Fallout games, and and now it's so weird because it's getting increasing, like the fall scenario is getting increasingly likely. Because I remember when fall game first came out, originally they were planning to use like a conflict between Soviet Union and United States, but but Soviet Union collapsed, so they just had to. It's kind of the last minute substitution that they use China, right? And but in 1990s, that this is still kind of seemed very far-fetched when Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 first came out. But as China continued to rise, and that challenges a U.S. Global hegemony. Now there's an increasing focus. In the beginning it was just a containment of China, and now they're talking about rolling back, rolling back China, and this is why you're getting this increasingly aggressive and provocative behaviors, like you talk about shooting missiles. Holding exercises, and I mean it's normal for different countries to have like different contingency war plans. I mean, U.S. had contingency plans to invade Canada. Like this is well known. But the, but it's one thing to have those, have those plans internally circulate in Pentagon, and another one to publicly talk about it in the op-eds in like Washington Post. I mean, like right now, they are basically preparing the American public for the eventuality, the possibility of a great war. And that's the scary part because now you have all kind of different mainstream media pop culture piece coming out. Like Fall is just the latest. It's because I remember there was ads from New York City, I think in New York City government, about what to do in case of a nuclear attack. And everybody thought it was crazy. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Why this is scaremongering? This is what they have been doing scaremongering for a long time, but now they're just like crank up to 11. And like you said, they publicly talk about fighting a war with China when look, China, Russia, they're nuclear powers. They have missile delivery capabilities. Why are we talking about a war that could potentially trigger a nuclear apocalypse? Like, shouldn't we try to get along? I mean, like, how about like a diplomatic solution for peace? Like that was never on the table. All we talk about is you got to increase the military defense budget. Yet for some reason, despite by $1 trillion of military spending, they can't even break the siege, the blockade in the Red Sea. In December, I remember everybody was posting on Twitter saying, those Houthis, they're gonna find out why we Americans don't have universal health care. Or like, I don't know how Houthis gonna survive, the tons of democracy we're gonna drop on them. These crazy talk, and 4 months later, we have U.S. making an offer and answer our in Yemen, ask them to stop. In return, we'll take them off the terrorist list. This is, I mean, this is you have U.S. admiral on newspaper saying, "Oh, this Prosperity Guardian is the largest battle the U.S. Navy has engaged after World War II." losing, losing that battle. And you're spending $1 trillion doing it, and now you're asking for more because you felt because okay, the conclusion is we haven't spent enough on spending, so we got to spend more. It's all to feed the trough of the military-industrial complex, and which leave very little to actually average Americans, because the empire not only devastate countries all across the world, but you also impoverish Americans inside the U.S. And speaking of Hawaii, I've been there. I've been there a couple of times. When I first flew to U.S., I actually flew northwest, so it was delayed. So we got rerouted through Honolulu, and I got lost in the airport because I because at the when you pass through the U.S. custom, they separate you and do individual interviews. So I got separated from the group I was traveling with from China, and when I came out, I went out the exit, and I realized, oh crap, that's exit only. I tried to go back in. I didn't speak any English, and I thought, oh my God, what am I gonna do for my next 20 years of my life on this island? But eventually, I find my way back. But in uh, on the night of on September 11th, I was in Hawaii. I was doing a project for Cheap Tickets. So that's when Cheap Tickets was still based in Honolulu. I was building their website for them, and at that time I already felt there was something like it's like I try to go to clubs on the weekend, and I would ask the girl at the front desk of information desk for help. She's like, oh, where'd you like to go? You want to go to, there's like club for the military, the club for the locals. I was like, what? It's just like you don't want to go to the clubs where the military hang out. You don't want to go there. Yeah, I mean, like there was a heavy military presence in Hawaii. I remember in the cheap ticket office, I look outside my window and there's like this giant aircraft carriers floating around in the harbor. And everything is so expensive in Hawaii. Like the I guess maybe everything have to shipped in when people in Hawaii makes less than people in mainland US. And then also I remember I went surfing with my local friends, or we went to a beach where um like the all the all the all the white mainlanders who bought all these beachfront property, they're giving us the evil eyes when we're going walking through their neighborhoods trying to get to the beach. So my local is like, what these people are acting like they own this place, it's our island, and they're looking at us like we're not supposed to be there, and so yeah, so I did notice something was off, even in the brief time I was in Hawaii. um and now they're making Hawaii into like the forefront on the war wage on China, which they keep on talking about we're fighting China to keep to secure to defend America. What you're actually doing is you're painting a target in all these places where U.S. military base is holding. If you if you launch a missile in Hawaii, you're making Hawaii a target. You're not making Hawaii more secure. You're making a much more dangerous place. And this is also why people in Okinawa want U.S. military base out, because they're like, you're not making us more secure. China have not invaded us in the last 500 years. But if you launch missiles from Okinawa against China, the Chinese missile is going to come back and hit us. And plus the U.S. military, wherever they go, they always cause crime, prostitution. And I guess the case of Okinawa is not that dissimilar from Hawaii, actually, because it was another Pacific nation that just got turned into a giant military base for the U.S. empire. And yeah, go ahead, Sam.
Yeah. I was just thinking, yeah, so many of the original, like, when I talked about the one of the big anti-military actions was obviously the Red Hill, where the U.S. military basically poisoning the water, and it hit so many people in Hawaii, still hurting us. And many of the lead, can't remember what her name was. Many of the lead organizers were actually Okinawan, or they were activists. That some of them are diaspora. Like much of many Okinawans live around the world, because of how much colonialism and empire and U.S. and Japan, and especially the U.S. right now, has pushed so many of them out of their homeland. And yeah, they suffer from many of the same problems. And so many Okinawan activists, like there's a lot of, like Native Hawaiian, like anti-colonial, anti-imperial actions, and trying to stop these environmental destruction, because Okinawa suffers from, I think the 70% of the military bases in Japan are in less than 1% of the land in Okinawa, and that causes so many problems, like you brought up, the crime, the prostitution. It's just like sometimes there's horrible murders, and then the U.S. military have the extraterritoriality. They basically can do whatever they want, and basically they can bully anyone in the world, anywhere, anyhow. And it really it's basically like that in Hawaii. Like they're like we're trying to fight, and like Okinawans are trying to fight. Please, we don't. I think it's like 90% at one point. 80s. It's way over 50%. Like have always like wanted the bases out. But the U.S., right, that claims to be democratic. I mean, that's the point I constantly come back to, is like, Haunani K. Trask, which is one of our great Hawaiian activist leaders, said that, like, the U.S. says it's democratic, but it's never been democratic. Not with Native people, Native Americans, Native Hawaiians. It's not even democratic with its own people. Like, I think it's like, even like the Ash Institute, the Ivy League colleges did their own studies, and they found that like 99% of all policies determined by money, not by lobbying, not by votes. But certainly for people like, especially where the U.S. is starting its military bases, they basically, Guam also is another place that's hurt by this, and so we've all, like, Guam, I think, is another place where the U.S. is building more bases there. They're ramping up actions, and that's causing more problems for their environmental, for their water, for their land, for their soil. And I think Okinawa, there's just so much. It's hard to keep track of how many of these actions they're doing, but they have a whole reef that the U.S. is trying to blow up, and they're going to build another, military installation there. And so all of our islands, and that they've laid it out there, like, we're going to use all of these islands in the Pacific like our little lily pads. The islands are going to be like the ground that we jump on, we smash them, and then we're going to shoot missiles at China, or somewhere in a proxy war around China. We're going to do a Ukraine proxy war somewhere in this region, wherever we can get it going. And it's like, and so, yeah, it's like reading about that. It's like, it's as an island, we're not very big. And so that's why we have to, population wise and like territory wise. And so we have to kind of, we have to, I don't know, we just do the best that we can, but we have to try to, I think like Singaporean diplomats, like, Kishore Mahbubani I don't know, who that is. Yeah. He talks about how has China won. If you're a small place, you have to be able to, you have to be very good at diplomacy, because you cannot have the world the way you want it. We're not a superpower, we're not a US or a large, great power. And so, and we also have to, we have to fight for our rights, but we have to, like, make sure that we're, balancing all of these forces and trying to, I spent a lot of time thinking about how can I talk to Americans and, other people, because it's really, as you said, it's not like Americans want to hurt Hawaiians by building more bases on top of us and make sure that Hawaiians can't surf at our own beaches, right? It's not like Americans, when they come, many Americans, even military personnel, right, they come and they go, oh, so it's not all of us, some of them will go, wow, this is actually, we're not actually helping Hawaiians that much. I've heard like military personnel, especially after they got poisoned, if they didn't realize it sooner, they're like, wow, the U.S. military, we as a military, and as part of the military myself, I have not made Hawaii safer. I've actually hurt Hawaii. So I think it's like trying to reach people before, as you're like saying, like, before you get, it's like, I often think it's like, it's really the brainwashing, the technology of mass, like, disinformation and conditioning is like what the West has excelled at more than anything else, because, I mean, obviously they have many weapons, they have many nuclear weapons, they have all kind of advanced technology, not using it very well. Like you point out, they're still losing wars, and they're very much like, it's a paper tiger in many ways, but they're very good at taking people, right, and telling compelling narratives, right, and then convincing them, the best thing in the world that you can do is you can sign up for the military, be all you can be, and like trying to, it can be difficult, right, to combat that. But at the end of the day, that's why it's like, we have to fight the imperial, the empire itself in all of our everywhere on the earth. And but it's something that, it's yeah, it really depends on who you're talking to and how you're talking to them. But I think, as you said, like, pointing out like these pointing out the nonsensicalness as much as possible all the time, and just basically like dunking on the empire as much as you can, to tell people what they already know.
I think one of the
yeah, go ahead.
I think one of the way I try to do is just try to appeal to everybody's um common sense of morality, but also their self-interest. Because American empire is not even serving the interest of the majority of Americans. The U.S. infrastructure is crumbling, while all the money is going to the military-industrial complex to pay off Lockheed Martin, Boeing, etc. And like I mean, the whole tweet about, oh, we're going to show Houthis why don't have universal healthcare. This whole tweet itself is kind of ironic because the guy obviously recognized U.S. is spending way too much on the military, but yet he's been proud. He's been proud. Okay, this is something we can be proud of. We can lay this tons of diplomacy and drop it on people when it doesn't actually materially benefit vast majority of the Americans. And on the contrary, it takes resources away from their from funding their education, their public schools, their education, because U.S. is actually incredibly secure. Geopolitically, it has two oceans, Pacific and Atlantic on either side, and it faced no serious threat either from Mexico or Canada. The whole so-called talking about defending U.S. interests in in Iraq, in Pacific, they're talking about defending the interest of the U.S. military-industrial complex, and it's just making a few group of these top elites and lobbyists, their lawyers, and these people rich. I mean, unless you actually work for Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, you don't really have, it's not in your interest to support the Empire Project. I mean, even if you work for Raytheon and Boeing, if you're not at the top, unless you're at the top executive level, you're actually, not. You're just getting the scraps. So this is what I try to do. Just like, look, the empire's benefits nobody. Most of, certainly not you. It benefits people at the top, all the Biden cronies, but you're not even getting the crumbs. Why are you cheering for that? And on top of that, it's killing people, right? I mean, it's we're sending weapons to Palestine to kill women and children. It's so. I mean, I think most people actually understood that intuitively. They just gotta somebody just got to articulate it.
Yeah. And yeah, speaking of that, the Palestine, obviously, there are a lot of current events happening. That's things are heating up. I mean, I feel we can talk a bit about that because I was all my feed is just watching the Israeli airbase that struck the Iranian embassy getting struck right now. So it seems like the United States, U.S. and Israel. They're not identical, but obviously there's a huge amount of overlap with everything that they do. They're both part of imperial project. Israel is like what is it, as Mao said they're the front gate, right? And the U.S. and the Western Empire trying to break through the front gate into Asia, and then Taiwan is the back gate. And so that connection between China and Palestine is often not many people support Palestine, but maybe they don't realize how much of an important friend and ally that China has been for a long time, and still is, and that Iran is, the articles in the Western media now is, of course, Iran is being randomly just aggressive at Israel, just kind of forgetting the whole fact that Israel just completely, violated core tenets of the UN resolutions, embassies, right? Shortly after that, Israel hit the Iranian embassy and taking out several high profile targets. Then was it Ecuador invaded the Mexican embassy somewhere else, and this is it's really destabilizing. Not the world was super stable before, but this is just it's another one of those the leadership is making things increasingly dangerous everywhere around the world. at the same time, but as you said, like they're not able to really win. Well, they never really have won any of the war. Did they win Vietnam? Did they win in Afghanistan? What did they win in Iraq exactly? Right? They didn't actually win the wars. They succeeded at, as you said, lining the pockets of Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, and those people. But they're the street, the world is not safer. The places are not. Those places are, bombed to the Stone Age. But their capacity to do that now, in the growing multipolar world, as is often talked about, is the such that Iran, and the axis of resistance, have Hezbollah, Yemen, as we talk about, Palestine, Syria, Iraq. They are, it's increasingly like they're not going to take this lying down. Certainly not watching the Palestinians, being innocent people and children being slaughtered every day. It just one major difference there, and I'll throw it back to you, is like, obviously, because it's basically every dimension is changing. Like we said, we were kind of bombarded with this Iraq, the Western, like TV, newspapers, like you work for the New York Times, or you do live in the New York Times, not work for the New York Times, but newspapers, TV, radio, mainstream media dominated most informational flows. Like if that's like the core, kind of one of the central things that keeps the empire going, right, is the ability to mass lie to people. But then now you have, like, obviously you have social media, like obviously there's TikTok, but even before TikTok, there's with Twitter and other platforms, it's much more like, one central, like the plutocrat or the wealthiest, most powerful Western interest is blasting their message. It's more democratized in a certain sense. It's still, manipulated, but it's, you can get shadow banned and you can get removed and such. But at the same time, it's harder for, the U.S. and Western, imperial allies to control that narrative. So what that means, and so that's like, if Iraq, like this is an example, if the Iraq war happened like now, you might see like 24/7 your feed just full of the Iraqi children who are also being, killed horribly, right? Like Fallujah, you can read about this later, but it was buried in that time. So their ability to manufacture the consent for that era, the Naughties wars, was much stronger. But now it's like everybody can see that happening. And so even Americans, like there's so much in the United States, it's really ripping the United States establishment apart. And I think they assume that they could get away with anything, and that's part of it, right? It's like this hubris. The U.S. and Israel, of course, they're like, they can, like, the golden child, the perfect little, they're like giant infants. They can do whatever they want to anyone and get away with it. And then now it's like there are actual consequences, like politically at home. There's consequences militarily because the non-Western global majority is getting stronger economically, politically, and then also information-wise, with and obviously and you can speak to, like, we can move into technology a bit, because I know you look into like what's happening with Huawei, the phone technologies, the social media technologies. China's leading on renewable solar, basically in every important domain, and maybe you can talk about that and like how that can help, how like understanding that can actually help people in the United States, if they join the Belt and Road Initiative. Maybe they could finally get some good things,
Well, I mean, you raise a lot of points. I'll try to address one at a time. You brought up the point where there are people who support the revolutions in Latin America. There are people who support Palestine, but somehow they're still like, no, China is bad. Like, look. Hamas is officially acknowledging that we appreciate China's position, right? And then you have people coming out, so like maybe China, the Chinese spokesperson shouldn't be the one who who are speaking about the ICJ ruling on the genocide. It's like, look, who are you to say? Hamas official spokesman has said they appreciate China's stance on this. It's same. Like, people support Cuba, right? And then they still say China bad. And you have like Castro saying, we really appreciate the help that China is giving us. And same thing with Venezuela, Bolivia. I think it's this interesting phenomenon. Of course, there's much stronger U.S. propaganda to indoctrinate their population on China. But I think it's also natural for people to sympathize with underdogs, right? Cuba, Venezuela, Palestine. Whereas China is a rising power, and also China is it's a like an alien culture to many people. People have many people in U.S. that speak Spanish, so like Latin America is more accessible to them. And whereas China is just so remote, and most of the information coming about to them about China is coming from all the mainstream media propaganda channels. So, but people have this amazing kind of cognitive dissonance. It's like, oh yeah, we support Venezuela, we support Cuba, we support Palestine, but China is bad. It's like, look, China is aligning with all of them, and all of them are appreciating China's help. Who are you as a Westerner to criticize China? I mean, it's your job outmost. It should be demanding change in your own government, like supposedly a democratic society, to implement some real democratic choices. And so this is, but enough about some so-called Western leftists. They don't have too much influence anyway. And so but China's rise of China is important because during the Cold War, when there was still a Soviet Union, United States ruling class they have to come to realize that if they were to survive the Cold War, if they were to win the ideological battle, they have to make concessions to the American working class. Otherwise they're going to have to revolt and revolution at home. So this is when, from the period of 1950s to about 1970s, and a little bit to 1980s, this is when they made concession to the American working class to divide, to allow them to enjoy a larger share of the pie. But it was not even. They made a concession to the white working class mainly. They were still screwing the black people and the people of color. But at least they had to they recognize the need that they have to make concessions. But after Cold War ended, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, what happened? They roll back all these they roll back all the gains of the unions of and all the progress made on workers' rights, and they have now, and it's most obvious when you look at the income distribution. The wealth disparity has shot up. Now today in 2023 is the inequality in US looks more like back in the roaring 20s, right? Back in the early 20th century, when you still have like robber barons and those people, because it's basically because they felt unchallenged. But with rise of China, it presents another opportunity when US again is facing a challenger to its global hegemony. This is actually another opportunity for the average Joes in US to demand their own rights from their government, which has been ignored for so long. And like I said, all the common welfare has been ignored in the interest of fattening the people who are ruling the military-industrial complex. And so in this way, in a very direct way, rise of China could be good for the U.S. working class people. You actually give them more bargaining chips in the negotiation with their own elite. And so this is appealing to people's common interest. And right now, the also U.S. people are seeing through kind of the emperor has no clothes, through the failed U.S. proxy war in Ukraine, for example. U.S. has piled tons of money to pop up Ukraine, to make a quagmire for Russia. But what really happened is Russia is grinding down the NATO military capability on the battle of Ukraine. Despite all the trillions of dollars spent on military, U.S. could not even produce enough 155 millimeter artillery shells for Ukraine. Why? Because the U.S. the military industrial complex realized there's not much profit margin in artillery shells. They make more in the kickback and grift opportunity from technological boondoggles like F-35s. There's more money to go around for the military top brass and all the military contractors rather than produce mundane commodity stuff like artillery shells. So even with $1 trillion spent on military, U.S. military actually doesn't have much to show for it because, as you point out, even as Julian Assange pointed out, they're in Afghanistan not to win the Afghanistan war. The whole Afghanistan war's purpose to wash money from the taxpayer basis of U.S. and Europe and into this small group of transnational security elite. This is exactly what's happening right now. This is exactly what's happening with this drum up for confrontation with China. This is so they can sell more weapons to Taiwan. This is when they can put more forward deployed U.S. military bases around East Asia, which provide more business opportunity for these companies supplying to the demands of the U.S. military. Halliburton made bank during the Iraq War. And this is at the time when the roads are crumbling. U.S. has no high-speed rail. I mean Indonesia. I mean Bali. Indonesia just had their first high-speed rail connect built by China, going 350 kilometers per hour. If U.S. actually signed on with Belt and Road Initiative, maybe California can finally get its high-speed rail. But well, I mean, it actually makes sense. The third generation old rail was in California was built by Chinese anyway. now that and now that somehow instead what happening is the U.S. is going the opposite direction. You have U.S. senators going screaming national security issues about Chinese claims at the U.S. port, right? That they're all like installed with Chinese spywares, and then they're saying Chinese garlic is a national security issue to the United States. I mean, everything, and Janet Yellen traveled to China again to complain about supposedly China's overproduction and overcapacity, and she's specifically talking about China's quote unquote overcapacity in sustainable energy, in solar panels, in solar panels, wind turbines, and EVs, production of electric vehicles. All these things that could help to fight the climate change. China is a world leader right now in sustainable energy. China leads the world in solar, wind, hydro production, and China leads the world in the building out the infrastructure for adoption of EVs. People are right. People are pointing out, oh, but EV will never work in US. You're right, because US electric grid couldn't support it. I mean, if you look at the electricity generation versus China and United States, for the last 20 years, the US electricity generation is basically flat. Whereas China is the overcapacity. That's because they are built for growth. The Chinese electricity generation looks like this, and it's still growing. And now a much higher and higher percentage of it is being replaced with sustainable green energy like solar and wind. But whereas in US, because we privatize all the utility companies, they're interested to squeeze out as much money from the existing infrastructure. They're not interested into invest into more excessive capacity, and this is lead to the problem like when Texas, people got froze their ass off when there was power outage they because when the storm knocked out the couple power generations, they don't have excess power capacity to come online to supply people. So people in Texas were freezing in the winters, and even um, other electric grid in United States couldn't supply their own power to Texas either because U.S. actually lacks the power transmission infrastructure to connect all these power grids. Like unlike China they figured out this problem of because most of the China's hydroelectric power were in the southwest region, in the very mountainous region, whereas the most developed part of China is on the east coast. So to supply power from hydro stations in the Tibetan foothills all the way to Shanghai, that will cause a lot of power loss. So they figure out a way. China figure out a way to create this thing called the ultra voltage power transmission, DC transmission that allow them to transmit power all the way across China with minimum loss. But US don't even have that technology, to like because China owns all the IP to understand how to work in a ultra high voltage power transmission. You have to be able to read Chinese menus, and people don't even a lot of people in the US don't even realize how far behind US in many fields compared to China. U.S. still lead in couple core technological arenas, like for example semiconductors. But in the other in many other fields, U.S. are being left behind. People who are criticizing EV are correct. U.S. cannot have EVs because extra EV. U.S. don't have the infrastructure for it. U.S. don't have all these charging stations. China have charging stations everywhere. U.S. don't have the charging stations. Even if they do have the charging stations, their power grids can't provide enough electricity to power all the incoming EVs. That's going to replace the internal combustion engine. So forget about it. And this is area where actually U.S. and China could work together. Like it's not people keep on talking about U.S.-China geopolitical competition, U.S.-China confrontation, but it's not China that's trying to confront United States. It's United States going across the world to China to confront China. China is perfectly fine with doing business with everybody, and China's business is business. United States business is war, and this is the fundamental clash of interest because U.S. is also in the Asia Pacific and telling everybody to choose side. You are either with us or against us. It's either us or China. People don't want to choose; they want to do business. Why can't we just trade with both United States and China? But that's not what U.S. is interested in because U.S. is already losing the competition in economic field to China. If you look at the investment in Southeast Asia, for example, the Chinese investment in Southeast Asia far outstrips the U.S. investment. Um, and the only place where U.S. might have a slight edge is in the Philippines, and that's because the deployment of the U.S. military to the Philippines, and because they propped up their they got their own man in office, Bongbong Marcos, because Bongbong Marcos has all his dad's corrupt money, bills like hundreds of billions dollars stashed in the offshore accounts that's been frozen by the U.S. So if you ever hope to see any of that of any of his dad's corrupt money, he has to get U.S. permission. So he has to do what U.S. says. That's why now Philippines is turning into a proxy in the war against China, and they roll back all the China Belt and Road project in the Philippines. That's why the investment on Chinese investment in the Philippines is on hold. But everywhere else in Asia, they're building high-speed rail. They're building the China-Laos railway. Vietnam just announced their top priorities to build their own high-speed rail and connect it with China. And there's a plan actually called the Pan-Asian Rail Network that will allow one day a person can travel from Shanghai to Singapore on high-speed rail. I mean, that's a vision. That's a long-term vision. This kind of vision that U.S. leader lack because all they care about is winning the next election. You know, all the tunnel vision is focused on the election cycle, just like the executives of U.S. multinationals. They only care about the next quarterly earning report, so they can get their stock price to go up. This is the real reason why U.S. is falling behind. In many ways, it's self-inflicted. It's self-inflicted problem, including the whole empire projects. This is self-inflicted because U.S. is still has tons of natural resources. You know, if U.S. just pare back its spending on the military-industrial complex and actually devote this money to healthcare, to education, to infrastructure building, there's no reason U.S. couldn't be, common people in U.S. couldn't participate in the prosperity. Yet, right now, what we have is U.S. is incredibly rich country, but the wealth is just going to the 1%. You know, I realized that even in 1990s when first came to U.S. You know, because I lived in south side of Chicago. I lived in Bridgeport, which is mostly working class area. But when I went to high school freshman year, my high school is Kingwood Academy, which is far south side. It's just outside of University of Chicago. It's in the ghettos, and so for I have to travel. I take hour and a half bus to get to school every morning, and you travel through the entire south side of Chicago, going through all this dilapidated project built public housing projects. And I was like, oh man, the US decline is real. I saw all the rusty subways but later I realized, oh, that's because the wealth all went to the suburbs or to because in Chicago at that time you have the Golden Mile, the Magnificent Mile, and then right next to the Magnificent Mile, all the glitzy shopping district, you have the Cabrini Greens, one of the worst housing project infested with crime, side by side, and that problem since 1990 has just gotten worse in US. I mean, more people are getting left behind. More people are getting pushed out of the middle class. And with all the money accruing to people like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, and I think people are recognizing it's a problem, but there's kind of general helplessness in US because people feel they can't do anything about it because the electoral process is broken. A lot of the young people have realized that after the Bernie Sanders campaign failed, sabotaged by the DNC, and now the DNC is pushing out the zombies Biden, going for the re-election. I mean, this 2024 election is like, that's like a deja vu. It's again you're choosing between Biden and Trump. This is our choices for the last 4 years. I mean, this is bullshit. It's time. It's time. This is how I try to talk to Americans. It's like it's time for a change. It's time for a change because the alternative is far worse. The alternative is you have all these crazies in Pentagon pushing for a war with China and Russia with nuclear powers that potentially could bring fast forward to the fall universe. and,
yeah, exactly. And that's like a lot of important points you have touched on. And but just to kind of add on to what you're saying about the we basically we're like we're almost like we're like right. I mean, I don't know. Soon it's predicted. I think even the U.S. Pentagon and the Rand Corporation estimate by 2027 there will be no possibility of the United States catching China. So a lot of them are talking about 2025 is the end. If you want to start a war, it's next year. And so, I almost feel like, like you said, I hope that Americans will do whatever needs to be done to, finally push for that change, like a real change, not just, have another warmonger that's owned by billionaires and the military industrial complex, but really make some change. I think it's difficult because I think you know, it's there's a lot of people that feel like defeated, but I feel like a lot of you know, like a lot of Western history and culture, like there have been some like revolutionary changes at different points, but you know, it's been a lot of the time it's been, you know, basically kowtowing, you know, like as a Hawaiian, like I think in like Hawaiian culture, like in the parts where, you know, we more are able to live the way that we live, like you don't like it's not normal, like an actual luau, just as one example, like a cultural difference. A luau, which you can go to Waikiki and you can have a billionaire who owns a hotel have very poorly paid like Hawaiians and other, you know, immigrants and mostly non-white people serve very rich people, right, in an expensive Waikiki hotel. But an actual luau, like when we would have it, like historically, it was where everything was, you know, all of the leaders in the vicinity, all of the leaders of, you know, Ahupua'a system was a name for basically the land divisions, and then a steward. We didn't really have kings, but the steward who had made sure that all of the food and the fish and the medicine and all the material needs that are being produced by the land, right? They're brought into a central imu. It's basically a giant earth oven, and it would all be cooked simultaneously. And then all the resources, right? Because we're talking about the inequalities, right, in the society that people are, you know, very upset about. But like there was like the actual luau was a process of all the working people will come bring what they have produced. There were no capitalists, there was no owner, there was no executive that would be taking a profit. It's just everything would go in, it would be cooked, and it would be redistributed by need, right? So whoever was eldest, like the kupuna elders and the keiki children, and then sick people were fed first, and then by the most able-bodied people, and then that would, it kind of like, it was like a public display of, you know, collectivity. You know, we have to care for everyone. Nobody is taking anything, and it would be like extremely you would lose prestige and you would lose face in the society if you were seen to have been hoarding anything at all, right? And so that's like deep in Hawaiian culture, and that's why a lot of people like Hawaii. They love they call it the aloha spirit and the Hawaiian, you know, hospitality, Hawaiian ways. A lot of people come and they stay here and they live here, you know, and there is something really important to that. And like that's even in my own family. As I said, they were raised American. They like, my mom watched Oprah and she wanted to, you know, she wore the shoulder pads. And my dad believes he's a Catholic, you know, he's a Catholic American before anything else. But still, they always told us, like, you always feed everyone. And that's part of the reason why my parents are poor and they're from basically the ghetto. They're from like the Oakland, they're like from the bad New Jersey part of Hawaii, is because like, even though like in their mind, they a lot of their mental world is Americanized, but they still like, they live out the Hawaiian values. They gave away everything they had, which meant that like wealthier Americans took advantage of them. They have like multi-million-dollar houses, you know, not Bang Bang Marco specifically, but like they have nice houses because they took advantage of others who were giving away, you know, in a capitalistic, selfish way. And so a lot of Hawaiians have ended up in a very impoverished state. And so, you know, but I don't think people, they don't really realize that, but it's like those values that you have, those actually like predate the American values. Just as one example, Hawaii in 1800s, we even had the world's first formal universal healthcare system, where, you know, healthcare was given free of charge. We had virtually no homeless in the 1800s. We had hydropowered electricity that was nationalized. That was not, you know, it was a state-owned enterprise. That powered 800 plus Honolulu lights. And then the United States, the USS Boston, collaborated with local white American capitalists. The first head of the General Hawaiian Electric Company was a white man who plotted with the United States to overthrow the Hawaii that was like living out those values in the 1800s, with the help of many Chinese, including Sun Yat-sen, who was raised in Hawaii, right, and became an important figure later in China. And he even said that he used Hawaii as a model of a socialist, anti-imperialist, independent China. Even Wikipedia admits that, and that's owned by a billionaire American. So, but anyways, so Hawaii had these values that kind of survived for a while, but then they kind of like, there were so many people would argue, well, Hawaii was already being changed in the 1800s, and it wasn't, you know, for many purists, many Western left, they say it wasn't socialist enough for me, you know, it wasn't communist enough, or it wasn't whatever. But at the same time, it's like, you know, no country is perfect. Like even Cuba, Castro, right, would say, well, we still have some private landowners here, so, you know, nobody is perfect. We have empires with militaries, and if we try to do anything different, we're going to be immediately under siege, just as, everywhere that, so Hawaii was early on under siege in part because of like, we were trying to lead an alternate path. And I'll throw it back to you in a second. But anyway, so long story short, so I think that like, I hope that like, people, I don't know exactly what it will take, but I know that, part of it is like kind of like coming to terms with, like, as we said, we've been brainwashing, like as for in Hawaii, trying to like get back to who we are, like culturally, and try to like, also to inform Americans that like, when you come here and you bring like this attitude and this, and you take advantage, you're destroying everything that you love. Like the reason why you want to come here is and there's many reasons why many Americans like, they like Native American cultures, and they like to, sometimes it's a little bit too culture appropriative, but there's many similarities, but it's like, you have to also like, if you impose like that way and that selfish, only thinking about yourself, only thinking about the short term, obviously the highest level of that is blowing the whole world up, so make $1 billion, right? Like we're talking about, right? But it's like on the smaller, it does work on the smaller level too. You're like, the mentality has to be, also adjusted individually and then culturally. A part of that is like, with I talk about like, I wish our kids, like we homeschool where we are, because the schools that we can send our kids to, like they don't teach any of the history. They teach, they have military recruitment in this school. Like, it's really gross. All of our Hawaiian schools, they're like, just, rah, rah, America, sign up for the Air Force. Like there's an Air Force ad. We drive every day by an Air Force ad, right next to the Hawaiian, where our, basically our reservation is like, hey, you want to get out of poverty, go blow up people in Afghanistan or in somewhere else, anyway. So, but yeah, I mean, you can take, I said a lot of things, so you can take that wherever you want.
Yeah, I mean, what you said about the military recruitment. So I went to a 90% black school in Southside Chicago in the ghettos, and the military recruiters, they come regularly to our school. I mean, they basically, said it for flat out. This is your military is your ticket out of the ghettos. This is your best shot at get a decent life. This is you either this is your choice, young man, and I call this America's poverty alleviation, right? I mean, that's the only option you get is join the military, and but this is sad. But what you said about the loss of the community, that's actually what U.S. need at this moment. The problem with hyper capitalist society is everything is being atomized. The community is being destroyed. Uh, everything is atomized to the individual level, because then each individual can be targeted to be the perfect consumer. To fill that spiritual void that you felt when you get cut off from your community. Because look, we human beings, we're social animals. We're not supposed to be lone wolves in the wilderness. We are supposed to be live in a connected, thriving community. But in the post-industrial revolution, first it add you separate the nuclear family away from the rest of the community, because most people were uprooted from the village, or they're immigrants that come to the cities, they work, they're already cut off from their support network back home. And then in US, increasingly the nuclear family is breaking down, so you're now just this one person that's perfect. It's like the perfect target for all the propaganda, for all the corporate media propaganda, and to just be the perfect obedient consumer, to buy whatever they sell you. This is not healthy. This is not healthy on any level. And this is why US is experiencing so many social problems right now. It's because of the breaking down of the community. It's because of the hyper individualism, the atomization, and the alienation that people felt as a result. Uh, yeah, things need to change, man. Things
Yeah.
need to change. This can't go on. This is, a lot of the fucked up shit in the Fallout games, that those are based on real life, like it only makes sense to us because we can see, the shards of truth in in real life, and our I feel one way I have to feel we have to kind of speak up is because we are marching down toward the fall future, and if nobody speak up, we're just lamb to the slaughter here. It's gonna yeah, it's not a good outlook.
Yeah, yeah. One of the speaking about Fallout, and this does dovetail because one of the problems, one of the things, with many things that Fallout, obviously nuclear bombs go off. You have radiation. You've got super hype. Everyone is just out for themselves. Cannibals, raiders, everyone's killing each other constantly. It's like super scarcity. It's just a waste. It's just a horrible place. The above ground, and then you have kind of like the vaults where things are. They seem a little bit better, but not always. And then there's also this, but there's also like especially in the show it comes out, right? There's drug use is a big thing, and that's like kind of part of it's simultaneously both part of the kind of this super individualistic, just kind of like empty way of consumerist existence, right? That was like a lot of second post World War II America. That's where a lot of it went, and the drug use, right, is both kind of like part of that like decay, and that a lot of people talked about at the same time. It's kind of like because in China there was the revolution, and they kicked out a lot of people who were narco trafficking, and so there's a lot less drug use suddenly in the country that had this, as you talk about frequently, you talk about on your podcast, century of humiliation. And then now the United States, it's almost like the United States ruling class said, oh, we can't sell the drugs there, let's sell it to our own people, see we can put down some of these leftists and these anti-war and the civil rights, and it's kind of like, so the drug use kind of really like took off, like it really exploded in that time. And I remember, like, I was just thinking about the Ghoul character in the TV show, and he's like a former Hollywood cowboy, right, who was making like anti-communist, like later on in the show you found he was like making kind of like Ayn Rand, who's a ex, she left the Soviet Union and wrote the motion picture screen guide for the preservation of American values, and she actually really talked about how like we're gonna make super individualistic cowboys, and they're all gonna be played by Clint Eastwood looking guys, and we're gonna focus and really we're gonna hone America to what it really truly is. We're gonna polish it down to selfish, individualistic, profit motive, and we're in a cowboy, and they're gonna be anti-communist, and you kind of see like he's having flashbacks at one point, and then he's doing all these drugs, and I was just I was just struck by like it's like very much like as you said, it's kind of like everybody kind of knows this is like part of what we're all inside of, and it's kind of like part of the self-medication and like overuse, because and a lot the United States is currently having a massive, obviously it's been having for a long time, massive drug problems, right? And then there's the opioid problem, and then that leads to obviously there's huge, again, billionaire capitalist interest in the United States, big pharma, that have been taking advantage of that. But now, and of course now you have the big fentanyl problem, and they're saying, well, that's China's fault. China made us take all that. But it's kind of like, well, for a long time, the West has been trafficking all kind of drugs for a long time into them, and now you're kind of for whatever reasons trafficking it, because it's there are people who make a lot of money selling these drugs that are Americans to their the wealthy Americans, making it, selling it to their own Americans, and it's kind of like as you said, self-inflicted. And so anyway, but you can comment on that, or anything else you want to say about the Fallout show. Go ahead.
Everything U.S. says about China right now is like 100% projection, right? I mean, like, because all the fentanyl crisis, they try to blame China for somehow doing a reverse opium war on the U.S. public, when fentanyl at this point is mostly synthesized in North America, and particularly United States. I mean, like, they used to blame on Mexico, but now most of the fentanyl actually are synthesized inside U.S. and distributed in U.S. But what they import from China is what they call the chemical precursors for fentanyl. But those chemical precursors are not like precursor made just for fentanyl. They're actually precursor for everyday pharmaceutical components. Because what happened is China now produce like somewhere like 80%, 80 or 90% of the world's pharmaceutical components. And so everything, all the base pharmaceutical components are made in China. So they import these ingredients that could be used as chemical precursors from China, and they through different channels they get shipped to North America, and that were in the hands of criminal gangs. They use these chemical precursors with other ingredients to synthesize into fentanyl. Now, China used to have a law enforcement cooperation with United States to track when these chemical precursors leave the factories of China, where they go, to make sure they go to legitimate sources rather being shipped to a transnational crime syndicate. So they used to have that tracing system to make sure those chemical precursors don't end up in North America to be synthesized into fentanyl. And then after all the then after US went crazy to slap sanctions on US, and they're doing this crazy reports talking about Chinese police station, secret police station in US, and China said, you know what, forget it, forget it. We're not working with you anymore. So China stopped this cooperation with United States, which made the problem worse. So one of the recent Chinese U.S. China rapprochement was actually talking about to bring back this law enforcement cooperation back on. But this whole thing again is completely self-inflicted. China was perfectly willing to work with FBI and the American law enforcement to track and trace all these chemical precursors to make sure they don't end up in the hands of criminal gangs. But but US now decided to accuse China to all kind of nefarious activities like implanting secret police station in US, and that's why China called off that cooperation. And so that didn't need to happen. And again, the fundamental problem is still kind of the breaking down of society, the decay of society in US. That's what created the drug use problem in the first place. This is this is like the movie Fight Club. I mean, the Fight Club is actually a commentary on kind of the atomization and alienation of the individual in a society. But I think that the message is somehow lost because a lot of people just take it the movie. Oh, Tyler Curtin is a cool guy. He's a cool, like, this all the powerful individual guy. Then the whole movie is a critique on the hyper individualism and on the atomization of the society. But anyway, this is US, so everything get turned around like 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 Star Wars Troopers,
Starship Trooper.
the Star Wars Troopers. People like it for all the wrong reasons. But anyway, that's the whole different topic.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, just on that, my main job is, I make video games and science fiction universes. So I could talk about that all day. But on that, it is interesting that I remember reading. I mean, one of my critiques I frequently bring up, as I make media, I make entertainment, right? So like mostly cyberpunk and dystopian futures. But I try to make commentaries that are like more, because as you said, kind of like you think you're conveying a message through your movie or your show, but yeah, it's like how much of that is actually coming through. Because I remember reading like military personnel like stationed in Iraq, saying that they had like Starship Troopers posters on their wall, like unironically, like just celebrating it, being like, yeah, I'm here to kill all the bugs, and the bugs are like all these people in this West Asia, and that's why I signed up, because I like Starship Troopers. And it's definitely like because some people will sometimes critique you, say, oh, that's too on the nose, that's too ham-fisted, you're saying it too directly. But I don't know. I'm kind of two minds. Like at the same time, you want people to actually watch it and don't be too repulsed by it, but at the same time, I think like coming back to the Fall TV show, I think like they do a good job of kind of having those critiques with things like the there's so many, I don't even know which one to start with. But I actually, one of the things I was just thinking about it today was the Knights of the Brotherhood where they have, it's basically they're on a military base. The Knights of the, if you haven't watched the Fallout, they're the Brotherhood of Steel. They're like a post-apocalypse military base that kind of, with a commander that kind of decides we're gonna be a knighthood that has like, they kind of look like medieval knights, but they have the super souped up power armor that was used in the final apocalyptic war, and they preserve technology. But like the Brotherhood, it's like on a U.S. military base with the the U.S. military installation on a big flat open. It looks like an air base, right? I think in the Fallout 1, it's an actual former base, and so the Fallout Brotherhood of Steel are like, it's very military culture. The kids all look like 1950s military in the show, but they're kind of like all like beating up on the smallest kid, and then like one of them's, oh, we just gotta find another small kid to beat up, and then you'll be fine. And I was kind of thinking how like in the suit, when they get in the suit, I think Maximus eventually, one of the main characters, gets in the suit, and like these small kind of scared kids that are just kind of around this kind of really toxic culture where you just beat up people that are smaller than you and nobody stands up for the little guy. And they get in a suit, and all of a sudden their voice is deep, and they actually get real power, like military power. They can throw a boulder like 200 meters, right, and destroy anything. And it's kind of like it's like I thought that was an interesting like kind of metaphor for the U.S. generally, like kind of a scared little boy that has all kind of problems that is not worked through them and likes to punch down at people that are littler. But and then there's a scene where like when the big strong knight in the armor gets into a conflict. He gets into a fight, and then he sends the smaller guy in front, like cannon fodder, like he sends the unarmed, no power suit squire to go get killed by the monster, and then when he gets attacked, he just kind of like loses it, runs away screaming, and I was like, oh, this is kind of like what the U.S. military does in all its wars, it's just like fail. But anyway, so I thought that was one of the interesting, kind of like commentary in the Fallout TV show.
in the Fallout lore, the Brotherhood of Steel is literally the remnant of the U.S. military. It was one of the kind of the U.S. military that went rogue, right? So what you said was that that's basically the U.S. military in Red Sea right now. The all powerful U.S. Navy in the Red Sea. When I posted a tweet says, there was the captain of the USS Eisenhower, U.S. aircraft carrier stationed in the Red Sea. He was posting like NAFO memes, right? Like the stupid dog meme. So I quote tweeted him. I say, oh look, the captain of the old and decrepit U.S. aircraft carrier is posting NAFO meme while getting ass kicked by Yemenis, right? There are all these NAFO people in the post, in the reply, and saying, yeah, what do you mean? The Houthis, they attack civilian ships. It's not the U.S. Eisenhower that's getting USS Eisenhower that's getting bombed. It's like we didn't get our ass kicked. It's the same kind of cope response when they talk about Vietnam. It's like we never got military defeated on the battlefield of Vietnam. Look, you spend crazy amount of money to send people all the way across the globe to sit around and post doing shit posting online. You kidding me? Like the military war is an extension of politics. Sun Tzu understands this. The war is always the last resort. But for these people, war is just a big mission context. Well, look at our aircraft carriers. Look at our armada we could send out. And what? And so what? And do nothing. And yeah, what's the last war the U.S. won? Like you say, did the U.S. won Afghanistan? The U.S. won Iraq war? What was the point? The point was just to make Halliburton rich. It didn't even trickle down to your common people, and you're shilling for the empire that actually what that just give you a rush by have their propaganda propaganda video play over and over and mission accomplished. I mean, there got to be more there got to be more to the meaning of life than that. I mean,
oh my god, yeah. And another thing I was thinking was the Brotherhood, and then there was the what was it? Oh, in the vault. I think you commented on that too. Some people thought that the humor, this is not necessarily a political commentary, but maybe it is too. where it is like there's a scene where the cousin, one of the cousins of the main character, the Vault Dweller main character, is sad because she has to leave and get married to somebody outside the vault, and then the cousin is like, no, I'm in love with you. And then there's just like this exchange where I think she says, no, you know, you can mess around with your cousin we might mess around when we were kids, but that's not a long-term viable alternative. And I remember it's interesting because like some people I mean I was like, that is how you can tell it's the Fallout humor, because it's very like dark humor but it's also like, you know, it's real, and then it hits the point. I think you said like that was the point where you were like, I think that this show has done it. They've nailed the vibe.
Yeah. That was Fallout. That got my buy-in.
Yeah, that one. And
well, because Fallout, the whole point of the Fallout vaults, like all of them have like dark, you know, purposes. You know, like it's a vault experiment. You know, the government is doing experiment on all these unsuspecting people by you know, using them as guinea pigs, isolating each vault. But you know, this is also kind of a commentary on, you know, the what the U.S. government is doing to its own population, essentially. But yeah.
And well, anyways, I know we've been I've had you for about 2 hours, so you know, we could probably call it in a little bit, but you know, is there anything else, you know, if you want to talk about anything about anything else that we missed, or you want to ask me, or your favorite scene, and you want to talk about Fallout or something else, I'll throw it to you.
Oh, we can just talk about Fall, man.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. Yeah, I got my endorsement. The Fall TV series got my endorsement. I like how it has all the callbacks to the old Fall lore, like when they broke their water chip. I was like, holy crap, that's a whole premise of the Fall one. And so they did those fan service for the old original fans of Fall 1 and Fall 2. So I enjoy that. And so I'm gonna keep watching. I only watched like 3 episodes. I just started to watch episode 4. So far, I think it's a good, because it's really hard to do game to video adaptations. You know, there's so many failures. Honestly, I didn't have high expectations going in, because I was like, oh, Bethesda, right? I mean, Bethesda, they're known for producing a game with tons of bugs and crash all the time. But I guess this time they actually hire professionals to do it. I mean, and Nolan did a good job making this film.
Yeah. I definitely I've posted like a couple of times already I'm posting it on I have multiple accounts, and I just like, you know, everybody watch this. It's got all your favorite things. I could partially selfish because I want another season. You know, I would like some more of that. And but you know, like I like you said, like there's lots of references to to really all the Fallouts, but you know, they go all the way back to the original, the 1997 Fallout 1. Like that's the first 2 are also like my favorite. I didn't play too many in the last, like the most recent ones, but the 1 and 2 I remember really liking those. And I played 3 and some of Vegas, but you know, 1 and 2, like the you know, they go into, like, I have to like pause one day I gotta come back and pause the screen, because there's like so many, like all the designs, like they have like the bottle caps, they've got like the Pip-Boy. I mean, there's like so much. They got so much of the world is so realistic. I also heard they went to Namibia. They actually went to Namibia to film an actual shipwreck. That there's a ship in the sand in the desert, like an old shipwreck, and there's like an actual place. They only had one chance to film that, because once you walk the footsteps you would leave, they can't do it again. They couldn't film it again. So I thought like the production team, the actors, the writers, everybody did a really it's a really good job. Even if you're not a Fallout fan, it's a really funny. It's very, you know, it's dark. You know, it's a fucked up world. It's Fallout, but it's like really funny. It's very you know, poignant. There's like sad parts. There's like very like you know, there's action in it, and it's, you know, yeah, it's all like very well done. Yeah, what was your favorite part?
Not for kids. It's not for kids.
Not for kids.
It's not for kids. Not for kids. It's very violent, very bloody, adult humor. But people listening to us probably are already of an age. So yeah, go watch Fall.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know. What okay, here, here's another separate question. Then, what was your favorite part of the original Fallout?
Oh, I actually, a lot of people didn't like all these kind of break the fourth wall kind of the humor in Fallout 2. I actually enjoyed it because Fallout 1 is a little bit too dark. I mean, that's a little bit too depressing. And a lot of people, because I played Fallout 2 is my first Fallout game. I played Fallout 2 before I played Fallout 1, and so that's my all-time favorite. I enjoy all the pop cultural references in the Fallout 2. And so yeah, so for me, because he kind of in kind of that bleak, dark post-apocalyptic world, you kind of lead the humor to lighten up a little bit. Even if it breaks through the fourth wall, it's I think for me it increased the enjoyment of the game.
Yeah. What was it? There is like I remember in Fallout 2. There's a lot. There is a I remember you can encounter a doctor. There's like a telephone booth in the middle of the desert. It's like a doctor who blocks it and mysteriously disappears. I remember that happening. I was just playing Fallout 2 the other night, and I was like, oh yeah, there's this like I think they're like there's a mine you go under the ground and you have to clear out the mine from all these nasty critters, and they look like the xenomorph aliens, but with some weird tentacles on it. I'm like, that's an alien with squid tentacles. What the hell is that? I was like, and then
Uh,
go ahead. Yeah. You remember that part?
yeah, like no, go ahead. Sorry,
Oh,
I'm just agreeing with you. I was just
oh yeah. And then there's another. And then there's what's the other thing? There was that. There's the Gort
the Rat King.
the Rat King.
I
Oh
like
yeah,
the Rat King. The King Rat. I mean, because like there's a Gordon Gecko reference. That's
yeah. The
what you're
Gordon.
gonna say, right?
Yeah. The Gordon Gecko, and he's like greed, for lack of a better word, is good. He's like talking like he's like the Wall Street movie with the Wall Street with the giant telephone. It's like there's like so many. Every one of them cracks me up too. I mean, I guess if you don't know all those references, but like every scene has like many of those. And then the other one I was thinking of was the Scientology. There's like a Scientology.
Oh yes.
There's the Scientology cult with the actual alien laugh. And there's a guy whose name is like
They also have a stand-in for Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. I guess this was made when they're still a couple. It's
yeah.
still married.
Yeah, the Tom Cruise. His name is like Comtruise or something, like it's very close to it, right? It's like, and Nicole Kidman, and they're like standing in front of the puppet, going, "Everybody, we're gonna increase our levels through this, and everybody's like drinking the Kool-Aid, listening to the Tom Cruise lookalike, and there's like literal aliens though, right? Because it's hey, yeah, it's
I killed them all.
you killed all the.
Killed them all. After I did the mission, I killed them all.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And then I think that's the first two Fallout, like the classic Fallout games, because they're like the true RPGs. The later games, like Fallout 3, is more like the first-person shooter, right? I mean, like there's less of it's more like the Bethesda Fallout game are more like first-person shooter kind of explorer kind of game. Allow you to explore the world. But I mean, it's fun too in its own way. But the first two is always my favorite because of like the real hardcore RPG element. There's so many choices that you could make. And there's no wrong way of skinning a cat. Did you play with the restoration pack? The Fallout 2 restoration pack?
Possibly. What did that add?
Okay, if you didn't look up the Fallout Restoration Project, so they actually, because they when they tried to rush out a sequel to Fallout 1, they were under a tight deadline. That's why when they rushed out, there were so many bugs and crashes. But there was also a lot of parts that got left off the table. So Restoration Project, they found the original design document for Fallout 2. So they put in all the things that got left out from the ship game. So it's restoring Fallout 2 to what it should be. It adds kind of like few areas. I highly recommend. And there are people doing all different kind of mods now. They're adding like talking heads two additional talking heads and voice talking heads. So check those out too.
Oh yeah,
I would recommend it.
yeah. I like I like those because it has that yeah, the some of the actors. I think in the first Fallout, I mean Fallout 2, you have actors. The first one, it's Ron Perlman. He plays Hellboy. You know, he does the War Never Changes. He does the intro, and he also does several voices. Actually, I recently, because I went and replayed it because of the Fallout TV show, and I was looking through the voice cast, and I was like, you know, the guy who played Monk was one of the voices. You know, it has like the voice of Rhombus, the one of the Brotherhood of Steel. He was I forget what other movies. He was in like Highlander. He was in like Starship Troopers, I think he was. So they had all the actually had a star-studded. Oh, Keith David, you know, they had all these really good actors. I mean, the whole game isn't voice, but when they have like an important character, or you know, like Harold the ghoul with a tree growing out of his head, you know, they have it. Yeah, you're right. And he talks to his tree.
He's my favorite.
He's like, oh yeah, I was just talking to my friend, my tree on my head. His name's Bob. No, I'm just kidding. His name is Melvin or something. Oh man, that guy is funny. Yeah, that was the best. One of the best parts. Like all the characters are like you definitely believe you're like these people have a real life inside of this world, and you can just, you know, you're kind of stepping in, and yeah, it's yeah, yeah.
You're making me want to replay. You're making me want to replay Fallout 2.
There you go. So Tim Kaine.
Like, did you ever do the shotgun marriage? You know, like, did you ever sleep with the farmer's daughter or the farmer's boy, and then get forced into a shotgun marriage?
Oh my god. I just no actually yeah, I think it was just the other night. Is that yeah? One of the towns you go in. The farmer got pissed off. I was like, "There's this girl is like flirting," and like, "Oh, what's happening?" And then yeah, then he wakes up in the middle of the night and it's like, "What are you doing in bed with my wife?" And then everyone turned hostile, and we got into a big war. And I was like, wait, I want to finish all the quests, so I'm gonna reload that. I don't know. I never did the shotgun marriage though. Where is that?
Modoc. I think that's the one where the Brahmin farmer has a daughter and a son. You can sleep with either one of them, because the Fallout is you can do whatever you want, and but like you. But I think you have to, the only way to get out of that situation peacefully when the farmer discovers you're sleeping with his kid is agreeing to a shotgun marriage. Then you get married in the local church, but your spouse become your follower. You can't ditch them. You know, they always follow you around, and the only way to get rid of them if they get killed, or you can sell them off to slavery. You can sell them to like brothels and. You can prostitute them.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, I have. That's one thing. You know, Fallout. You can. There's so many things to explore. I didn't get to that one, but oh man, yeah, and yeah. So I remember the slavery. You get to the slavers. I definitely every time I go there, you gotta kill all those guys. With all.
Oh yeah. One of my favorite way is stealing, because that's the easiest things to get money and equipment in the early game, because I just save scum everything, you know, save the game before I steal, and then just take, because I was like, well, there's no reason why they should have items on these people if it wasn't for me to take them on this game.
Yeah, you know, I just, you know, I'm searching in all their bookshelf, and I search inside of your stove and your clay pot, and I think yeah. I mean, if you don't get it, you're not gonna have enough stim packs by the end to fight, you know, the master or all the enclave giant super souped up dudes, and the oil platform isn't it? And you go to the U.S. the secret offshore oil platform.
Yeah, that's the end. Yeah, that's the end game. You go to the enclave headquarters on the Poseidon oil platform, and the best Easter egg is when you go to Gecko, when you try to fix a Gecko power plant. There's one option. You could trigger the computer sequence to talk to enclave guard, and then you can mess around with him. You can talking shit with him, but after a while he will send a enclave vertebrate gunship after you, and then and then at that point, if your speech is high enough, your charisma is high enough, you can bullshit them, allow you to get away. Otherwise, you have to fight them.
Oh my god.
Like, which is not good idea early in the game. But yeah, you can do that. But it's fun. You should like save and at least trigger that sequence, because that was the best
That was the best.
talking head sequence.
Okay. Well, I think I
Yeah.
missed that. I have to go back. I have to go back and try that. Well, anyways, I think we covered. One day we're gonna have to just do the Fallout cast. You got, yeah, yeah. Remember, if your thumb, if the mushroom claw is bigger than your thumb, okay, then that's it. It's smaller, then you can try to run. So, oh man. So anyways, I should probably let you go though. But it's been really great to talk about your Fallout and, of course, all this Asia and Pacific and anti-imperial topics. Yeah, anywhere you want to tell people where to find you and anything you have going on?
Okay, yeah, I'm a prolific ship poster online, so you can find me on Twitter. My handle is just my name, Carl Za, one word, and you can also find me on YouTube. I do have a YouTube channel, again, under my name, Carl Za, or you can go to Patreon. So I do run the Silk and Steel podcast on Patreon. I do a chronological retelling of the Chinese history from the beginning. Right now, I'm up to 535 BC, so I have a couple thousand years to go. And so yeah, and I also talk everything China, everything like history, culture, and politics. So go check it out. Yeah, that's it. That was fun, man. That was a fun conversation.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun. But we'll talk again sometime. Hopefully, if they don't drop the big one first, then we'll maybe have some more conversations. But yeah, anyways, I'm Silver Spook. You probably know where to find me, Silver Spook, all over the place. The YouTube channel, if you're watching it there, and support us on Patreon if you can. Yeah, thanks so much. Bye everybody, and